All right, what is going on, Chiefs Kingdom? Welcome back to the KC Sports Report. Michael Darcy, your host here as always. And today I'm going to break down the Kansas City Chiefs' final 53-man rosters. So it's been a while since I've talked to you guys about anything Chiefs related. It seems like I'm making videos like once a week, and that's just not enough. I'm trying to get more content out for you guys, but I will say, kind of giving you an update on my life. I've started college classes. Yeah, your boy's getting old. So I've started college classes. I'm working on a lot of stuff behind the scenes. There's so much in terms of production and video uploading and editing and the business aspects of the channel, the merchandise, stuff that people don't really see. I mean, I'm a one-man team. I do everything, so I've kind of spent the last couple weeks just focusing on that, and I've actually gotten to the point where I can talk about the release of my new website. It's going to be called kcsportsreport.com. I'm working on the final details of it right now, so it might take a while for it to get out, but it's going to be a media company. I want it to be called KC Sports Report Media Co., and the goal is to have a bunch of different Chiefs content creators write articles and upload videos to the site, furthering the KC Sports Report brand and just adding on to my resume, because I'm still trying to break out in this field, and I'm very appreciative of you guys. You guys have always been there. We hit 6.1K on the channel, which is just such a big number. But I understand that in order for both brands to grow, I have to focus more on YouTube and put more time into it. So this winter, this Chiefs season, I'm going hard. I'm going to try to get videos out almost every day, including a podcast, which may or may not happen. But the point is I'm very dedicated. And I just wanted to say that I have been working on stuff, even if it hasn't translated into a video. I have been working. It's not like I've been taking the time off. And more stuff is on the horizon, and a lot more fun stuff is in my future, because I really think that the KC Sports Report brand is special, and I'm going to work on keep growing it. I think I can grow it, and that's my goal right now. So I went off on a huge tangent there, but why don't we go over some of the players the Chiefs had to cut in order to get down to a 53-man roster. So coming into today, it is August 31st, 2021. At the time of this recording, at least, there was 80 men on the roster, and the Chiefs had to cut a lot of them to get down to 53, and they had to make a couple tough choices, which I will get to while I read this, but I do want to say that I'm going to go over the waived players, the released players, and then go over the players that actually did make the active roster. That's kind of how I want to do it. So with the first wave of cuts, so to speak, cornerback / linebacker Zane Anderson, not a huge surprise there. He's probably a practice squad candidate. Wide receiver Dalton Schoen, he did nothing, not a surprise cut at all, or a surprise waive. Wide receiver Darius Shepard, he got waived as well. Damone Harris, defensive end, he got waived. He's a practice squad guy most likely. Linebacker Omari Cobb. Now, in my opinion, Omari Cobb should have been a guy that made this team over Ben Niemann. That is how much I like Omari Cobb, and that's how much I think that he could be a productive linebacker on this team. Now, obviously, Ben Niemann seems to have to make the team every single year, but I think that Omari Cobb's the guy that's probably going to win a spot on the practice squad, and who knows, he could fight his way up to the active roster. Defensive end Austin Edwards was waived. Safety Devin Key was waived. He's a guy that a lot of people thought had a chance of making the active roster. That kind of fell through in the preseason games where he just got burned. He looked good in training camp, but it just didn't translate against NFL competition. Center Darrell Williams, do not get him confused with running back Darrell Williams. Running back Derek Gore got cut, or waived, so to speak. And that one makes me a little bit upset, because I think that Derek Gore has a lot of talent. He's probably going to make the practice squad. I was actually at that third preseason game, and when he caught that dump-off pass and took it 60 yards to the house, I lost my mind. That was one of the couple times during that evening where I rose to my feet and screamed my head off, and Derek Gore taking it to the house was definitely one of those moments, but I think that he's a guy that's most likely going to be on the practice squad, and he's going to have a chance to fight for the active roster at some point. I've heard a lot of stories about him from people that have actually played with him. Shout out to Blake Schneiders, who played with him. I believe it was Coffeyville. He said that Derek Gore was the hardest working guy on the team. So I think that when you get those kind of guys, you can't hold them down for too long. Offensive lineman Wyatt Miller, he was waived. He's probably done. Wide receiver Maurice French, one of the few wide receivers brought in this offseason for competition, didn't end up doing anything. Running back Darwin Thompson, he was drafted a couple years ago on the 6th round, and I think that, whenever a guy gets drafted, the expectation is to be a star among Chiefs fans, and that's honestly not fair to him. He's a 6th-round draft pick. He was severely undersized, but, one thing that you can never take away from Darwin Thompson is his work ethic. I saw it firsthand at training camp. He was a guy that literally put in 110% every day, even if it didn't mean him putting up great practice numbers or even looking good in practice. Darwin Thompson, unfortunately, had a terrible training camp. He couldn't block. He got basically pushed around in the drills, and I think that that's probably what led to him getting cut, but like I said, he's the hardest working dude on the team, or one of the hardest working dudes on the team. He was always late after practice, or always the last one after practice to leave after using the jugs machine for what seems like 10, 15 minutes straight. He was always running sprints up the hill. I mean, he literally did everything you could see out of a player to work hard. Unfortunately, that didn't end up working out, and he didn't make this squad, but, you kind of saw it in the preseason. He had a few good moments and a few good games that is probably going to keep him on an NFL roster. So, best of luck to Darwin Thompson in the future. I think he's got a lot of talent. It just didn't work out in Kansas City. Cornerback Marlon Character, he was waived. Quarterback Shane Buechele. Shane Buechele is a guy that I personally think had no business being on this team over Anthony Gordon. You saw it in the preseason game. He threw a pick 6 after the Chiefs, 4th and 5th stringers, pulled off a great fourth down and goal in the red zone stand. That really, really frustrated me, and I just think that Shane made a lot of really bad throws. He saw potential, but it didn't outweigh the bad quarterback play. So, I would have rather seen Anthony Gordon on this practice squad, but that didn't end up happening. I think Shane Buechele is probably a guy that squeaks onto the practice squad, but, he's never going to play, so it really doesn't mean anything. But me personally, I prefer Anthony Gordon. Cornerback or defensive back, DiCaprio Bootle. Defensive tackle, Tyler Clark. Defensive back, Rodney Clemens. Let's see. Defensive back, Bo Peep Keys. He was drafted a couple years ago. It kind of sucks to see him not make it. And not the final, but the one that really surprised me today and kind of frustrated me a little bit was the Chiefs released wide receiver Cornell Powell. And if you guys know, Cornell Powell was drafted in the 5th round this year. And, I really think that he didn't get the opportunity to shine in preseason or in training camp, and that's why it's frustrating. But I think he's more than likely going to make the team on the practice squad. He's got a lot of talent, and I think that the Chiefs are banking on him going to the practice squad, getting better, learning the playbook, practicing with his team every day, getting used to NFL play and the NFL life. And I think that he's a guy that, maybe not this year, maybe not next year, but eventually we're probably going to see him up at the NFL level. But it does suck to see a guy that, I think has a lot of potential not make it his first season. Linebacker Emmanuel Smith was waived. Prince Tega Wanago, that's a mouthful. The tackle, he was waived. And finally, defensive end Tim Ward was waived. And a lot of people thought that he was going to make the team. I personally didn't, but he had 2 sacks against the Niners in the preseason game. And he looked all right in training camp. So I think a lot of people kind of bought into the hype and had him making the team. I personally didn't, but I think he's a guy that probably isn't going to make the practice squad, but he'll go to some other team and succeed most likely. And the Chiefs released a couple different wide receivers. The first one's not a surprise in Garrett Dieter, but the second one's Marcus Kemp. And Marcus Kemp was a guy that a lot of people thought was going to make this team. He's great on special teams, and he made a great touchdown catch in that 3rd preseason game. But, my opinion on Marcus Kemp really hasn't changed over the past couple years. I think he's an all right special teamer and a good receiver, or actually flip that around. He's a good special teamer and an all right receiver, but he's kind of hit his ceiling as a receiver. He's not somebody that's going to make this team and drastically improve. It wasn't going to happen. So I think that, in making room for another guy that we're going to get to later on, and making room for that guy, Marcus Kemp is just the odd man out. He's been here forever. He's been on special teams. He was part of that Super Bowl championship team. It just doesn't make sense to carry Marcus Kemp when really all he's good for is special teams. And actually last night, I guess 2 nights ago by the time that you're listening to this, the Chiefs traded offensive lineman, I think he was a tackle, Yasir Durant to the New England Patriots in exchange for a 7th round draft pick. And Yasir Durant was an undrafted free agent coming out of Missouri that the Chiefs brought on. He played a little bit last year. He looked all right when Mike Remmers wasn't playing. I personally wasn't a fan, but the fact that you turned a UDFA into a 7th round draft pick just basically speaks to what Brett Veach is doing here in Kansas City and what his eye is for talent. Because I honestly would have just cut Yasir Durant, but the fact that you got a pick in exchange for that, I'll take it every day. So that kind of shows you what we got in terms of the players that we cut. And on the PUP list, which is players unable to participate, Kyle Long is on that list, and he was the guy that we brought in earlier this offseason, and he really has not played very much. So that kind of rounds out the cuts and the waves, but why don't we get to the active roster? Because that's the fun part. So the quarterbacks the Chiefs are carrying 2. Obviously, Patrick Mahomes is your number 1. No surprise there. Chad Henne is your number 2. The Chiefs are carrying 3 running backs this year. You got Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Darrell Williams, and Jerick McKinnon. I think that Jerick McKinnon could be a guy that surprises a lot of people this year. The Chiefs are carrying Michael Burton, the fullback. The Chiefs just have to carry a fullback every season last year, and in years in the past, it's been Anthony Sherman, but he retired this year, so obviously Big Red had to pick up a fullback, and so Michael Burton is that guy. They're carrying 5 wide receivers this year, which is 1 less than I thought that they would, but I'm not complaining. The Chiefs have so many good players that you're going to have to cut and make a sacrifice at one position, and it just appears that receiver was the position that they chose. The number 1 wide receiver is Tyreek Hill. Mecole Hardman's your 2. Byron Pringle's your 3. Unfortunately, Demarcus Robinson is your 4. I don't think he should have made this team, but that's just me. And the 5th wide receiver, a guy that snuck onto the team this year, is Daurice Fountain. And Daurice Fountain was a Colts special teamer in years past. The Chiefs brought him in this offseason for a tryout, and he ended up impressing everybody. In the preseason and training camp, I actually wrote an article for KC Kingdom talking about if he'd make the team. I thought that he would. And Daurice Fountain is going to be a member of the Kansas City Chiefs. So it just kind of goes to show you that if you work hard enough, literally anything is possible. So he's a guy that also is going to offer some size and weight to this receiving core. He could be an X receiver. We're going to kind of have to wait and see, but I would not be surprised if he got more receptions than Demarcus Robinson, and I don't think that's that much of a stretch. Now, the Chiefs are carrying 4 tight ends this year, and that's a big surprise. Well, not really. It's not really a big surprise, but one of the guys that they got on here, which I will get to in a minute, is going to be very good. And I'm not talking about the first tight end on the board, and that's Travis Kelce. They got Blake Bell, Noah Gray, and the final tight end that made it, and honestly, I'm so glad for him, is tight end Jody Fortson. You know, he's been on the practice squad for the past couple of years, but actually as a wide receiver, he made the transition this offseason by putting on like 20 pounds of muscle to convert to a tight end, but he still has that speed like a receiver would, and he showed out. I mean, he looked great in the preseason, looked great in training camp, and he was kind of a no-brainer. I really thought that the Chiefs were going to try to carry 4 tight ends this year, and Jody Fortson's a guy that could be a pretty big part of this offense, especially in the receiving game. I think that he's the guy that, heck, maybe you line him up as the X receiver, or maybe somebody that you line up in the slot. He's got the speed and the size, and I think that he's going to have a pretty good chunk of the offense this year. We're going to have to wait and see, but expect Jody Fortson to get in on the action. The Chiefs are also carrying 10 offensive linemen. The first one's Orlando Brown Jr., no surprise there. Joe Thuney, Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith, Lucas Niang, Austin Blythe, Andrew Wiley, Mike Remmers, Nick Allegretti, and Laurent Duvernay-Tardif. And honestly, I think that carrying 10 offensive linemen is huge. The Chiefs' starting offensive line, at least in my opinion, is left tackle Orlando Brown, left guard Joe Thuney, center Creed Humphrey, right guard Trey Smith, and right tackle Lucas Niang. But in the event that all of those guys got hurt, let's just play devil's advocate here. In the event that all of those guys got hurt, you have a starting caliber second string offensive line. And that's huge because last year the only thing that held this team back from winning a Super Bowl was the fact that they didn't have an offensive line. And this year that's not going to be a problem. Now let's get to the defensive side of the ball. The Chiefs are carrying 4 defensive tackles this year. The first one's Derek Nottie. You got Jerron Reed, the guy from Seattle this offseason that they brought in. Tershawn Wharton and Colin Saunders, a third-round draft pick from a couple of years ago that I've heard he's actually been pretty good this offseason. So he's the guy to be on the lookout for. Now to the defensive ends. The Chiefs are carrying 5 of those. Oh, it's interesting. They actually have Chris Jones listed as a defensive end, which thank God because the Chiefs need some edge pressure, and Chris Jones is that guy. But, he's also the second best defensive tackle in the game. So I would like to see him kind of rotate from a nose tackle or a D tackle to a end, but the Chiefs are probably going to use him on the end a lot. But yeah, Chris Jones is your 1, Frank Clark is your 2, Mike Dana at 3, Alex Okafor is 4, and Joshua Kando is 5. I personally think the biggest question marks, so to speak, are Mike Dana and Joshua Kando. Dana looked pretty good this offseason. He's kind of taken that jump. And Joshua Kando, he's got a lot of raw potential and athleticism, but we're going to have to see if that transfers over. He had a pick in the preseason game, I understand that, but there's a lot more to playing the defensive end position than just getting sacks and interceptions. It's setting the edge. It's doing the small things that help this defense overall. And so I hope that he's kind of developed enough to the point where he understands his role, and I think that he'll be a solid defensive end this year. The Chiefs are carrying 6 linebackers this year. Anthony Hitchens, Nick Bolton, Willie Gay Jr., who actually has turf toe right now, allegedly, according to head coach Andy Reid. So that's a guy to be on the lookout for, and hopefully he heals up quick. Ben Neiman, unfortunately, Darius Harris, and number 6 is Dorian O'Daniel. And Dorian O'Daniel, in my opinion, probably should not have made the team. He's not really that good as a linebacker, but he's one of Dave Toub's special teams guys. So that's kind of why he made the squad. And heck, if he's great on special teams, I guess that's good enough. But if it's up to me and I'm assembling this team, Dorian O'Daniel is most likely a guy that gets cut. I just don't think that he does enough to keep him on this team. The Chiefs are carrying 6 cornerbacks this year. The first one's Rashad Fenton, L'Jarius Sneed, Travarius Ward, DeAndre Baker, Mike Hughes, and the 6th and final one was kind of a surprise in Chris Lamons. I actually thought that he had a pretty quiet training camp and preseason. He didn't really stick out to me. Again, I'm not a scout. I'm not somebody in the Chiefs front office, so I can't really tell you what to think. But I didn't really see Chris Lamons as the guy making the team. So I'm going to be interested to see what we get from him. I'm obviously very happy for him, but I personally would have given that spot to Bo-Pete Keys or even Devin Key as a defensive back. Now, getting over to the safeties, the Chiefs are carrying 4, and in my opinion, I love this Chiefs safety group. You got Tyrann Mathieu, the Honey Badger, as your number 1, Daniel Sorensen, Juan Thornhill, and the 4th and final safety, and my guy, Armani Watts, made the squad. Armani Watts is a guy that, in my opinion, has so much potential and so much talent, and I think that he's a guy that could come off the bench and be a pretty productive safety for this team. We saw it in the preseason. He had 2 picks. I mean, that doesn't happen by chance. It's by being in the right place at the right time, and Armani Watts knows where to be. And I think that he's really looked good in all of the opportunities that he's gotten. He looked good in Week 17 last year, he looked good in training camp, and he looked good in the preseason. Give the man the opportunity, and he's going to shine. That's all I got to say about that. And going over the specialist, obviously our kicker is Harrison Butker, our punter is Tommy Townsend, and our long snapper is James Winchester. So, yeah, that's kind of how the active roster has shaped up. The 53-man roster is complete, and honestly, I don't have too many complaints. There's a couple guys that I personally would have had made the team, and Cornell Powell and Bo-Pete Keys. But, I think that the Chiefs really know what they need to do in order to win a championship, and Brett Veach especially knows what they got to do, so I'm very confident in the team that we have, and honestly, I'll say it right now, this is the deepest Chiefs team we've ever seen. I don't think that in the Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid / Brett Veach reign, we've never seen a team this deep. And I think that's going to be a very scary thing moving forward for a lot of opposing teams. They have no way to stop this depth. I mean, I was talking about it earlier in the video. The Chiefs have a completely separate offensive line unit that could step up if the whole starters got knocked out. If they're all gone, you have a starting caliber backup line. And that is so uncommon. I don't think you understand how uncommon that is. So I think the Chiefs just have depth so many different places. And I mean, Brett Veach will tell you firsthand, the best way to win a championship is by having depth. That's how you win championships. And it's no surprise that the Kansas City Chiefs have the correct formula and the correct players in place to get the job done this season. Thank you for watching this video. If you guys enjoyed it, hit that like button, comment, and subscribe for more of the best Chiefs content on YouTube. You can also follow us on Instagram for more of the latest updates on future videos, as well as instant Chiefs news right after it happens. You can also support the channel via the Patreon, as well as buying merchandise from the KC Sports Report store on Teespring. The links to all of those websites will be in the description. You just listened to the KC Sports Report presented by Michael Darcy.